A federal judge is reported to have launched an appeal to halt the planned release of videotapes from Guantanamo Bay, showing among other things the forced feeding of a Guantanamo Bay hunger striker. The US Justice Department told District Judge Gladys Kessler, who filed the report, that she was substituting the court's judgment for that of executive branch officials, which was contrary to the established precedent. The government has asked Kessler to halt the process that has been set up to enable the release of the tapes, which would, for the first time, lead to the disclosure of classified information in a proceeding involving a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay. The footage is said to show how a prisoner on hunger strike at the Guantanamo Bay facility is forcibly removed from his cell, strapped to a restraining chair, and force-fed liquid materials. Our lawyer representing the prisoners said the video was, quote, hard to watch. Nathaniel Amasansum, The Report.
And in the studio to discuss that story about the force feeding inmates at Guantanamo is Aisha Maniar, who's an organiser from the London Guantánamo Campaign. Aisha, welcome to the programme. Now, I know that Guantanamo is a kind of black hole legally, but do the prisoners have any rights whatsoever when it comes to this kind of treatment?
Well, it appears that they don't, and the main reason is because that's how the US law works. Unfortunately, with respect to the hunger strike, this is how they would treat US prisoners in federal prisons as well. And as one of the things that the media never seems to highlight is that this kind of behaviour would not be acceptable anywhere else in the world. This kind of case would never come up in the UK, for example, because for at least the last 3 decades, it's been against medical ethics to force feed prisoners.
Okay, so is there any legal avenue of redress at all, or is that just completely out of the question for these people?
Well, that's what their lawyers are looking at into the moment, and there have been attempts over the past almost 13 years that Guantanamo Bay has existed. The lawyers for the prisoners have exhausted almost all of the legal avenues available in the United States. And one of the most amazing things, of course, about Guantanamo Bay is that Barack Obama himself is an administrative lawyer. He's an expert on the US Constitution, administrative law. He made an executive order to close Guantanamo Bay, which should have some kind of legal force, but he hasn't done anything like that. So at the moment, it's very much just a case of the legislature, the government making these laws, and the executive versus the US courts, because very often when these cases do come to court, they do win, as Wael Diab himself has sort of won his case to have these videotapes disclosed. And essentially, it's not so much about the videotapes itself, but the very simple fact that he is being force-fed. And the force-feeding itself is not to make a scene or to draw attention to himself, as the US military has said. He's on hunger strike. He's starving himself for justice. He wants to be freed, because the larger fundamental issue here is you can't hold people for 13 years without charge or trial. He doesn't know why he's there. We don't know why he's there. And Judge Kessler herself has no idea why he's been held there for so many years.
So, and what's the legal battle over the release of the footage, just to bring us up to date about that?
The legal battle is that lawyers for Wael Diab, who wants an injunction made by the courts to force the military to stop force-feeding him, they want to have this footage shown, because the military says that it's actually it's a medical procedure. It's not against his human rights. So if this kind of footage is shown, and of course it is the first time that they will be showing something that goes against the confidential information being brought out into public, and secrecy is very much part of what happens at Guantanamo Bay, then the world would be able to see, because this would come through to the media in some form, even if not all of it is made public. The actual hearing itself last week, large parts of it were held in closed court with just the lawyers and perhaps just select media, if any, and the parties, and that was it. So it is very much a case of we would see what the horrors of the hunger strike are.
So at the moment, all we've really heard is the reports of what has been seen by the lawyers. None of this is yet out in the full public domain.
Well, I would assume that the lawyers themselves have not seen the the lawyers for Wael Diab, who's not the only prisoner who's on hunger strike. At the end of last year, because of the attention that the hunger strike was drawing to the Guantanamo prisoners, they actually stopped reporting who was on hunger strike, how long they'd been on hunger strike for, and so on. There's been no information. I assume that it's only the lawyers of Wael Diab himself who've seen this footage, and not the lawyers for other prisoners who are being held in exactly the same circumstances. I can't be fully certain about that. But yes, it's just simply that it would be very shocking to see this happen. And the only other place we've seen it is when Mos Def had a go at this force-feeding procedure himself. And even that, most people found that incredibly shocking.
Watch, yeah.
He couldn't go through it himself. And this is what people have to go through 3 times times a day at Guantanamo Bay.
And has there been any sort of crisis of conscience by the medical staff who are doing this? Because, I mean, you'd think that this is, you know, breaking the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath says that medical staff should do no harm. Has there been any kickback from the medical staff who are obliged to do this?
Well, again, there's a lot of confidentiality. So if there is a large number of medical staff who are refusing to, we do not know anything about that. There was one nurse, and I believe it was Wa'il Diab, again, the prisoner who's involved in this case, who wrote in a letter to his lawyers that there was one nurse who refused to force-feed the prisoners. And as we know, again, using this issue of secrecy, the military decided not to court-martial him and give him a trial, because in that case, again, secrets and information about what's actually happening at Guantanamo Bay in the hunger strike would come out through that. And instead, he's been given disciplinary measures, and he's likely to lose his job as well, and his benefits of having been in the military.
OK, Aisha, thanks very much for bringing us up to date with what's happening in Guantanamo Bay. That's all we've got time for in this part of the programme, but do rejoin us after the break when we'll be looking at renewed conflicts at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Stay with us.